Professor Mortenson, thank you for joining us on CGTN. Given the recent developments involving Venezuela, could you share your assessment of the situation from the perspective of international law?
It is the general agreement of experts in the US, as abroad, that there is no international law justification for what the Trump administration has done in Venezuela. Because the UN Charter is really quite straightforward. The use of force is prohibited under the UN Charter. Now, you might think, how can that be? Sometimes nations must use force to defend themselves. And of course, that's exactly correct. But there's certain procedural requirements, but that's the basic structure of how the UN Charter framework works. A prohibition on using force combined with an exception from the prohibition, but only if you suffer an armed attack and are responding to it. I don't see any serious argument that there has been any kind of action by Venezuela or even by non-state parties affiliated with Venezuela that would come close to constituting an armed attack. The precedent of Manuel Noriega in the 1980s has been invoked. Whatever you think about that, there were really important distinctions involving an actual attack on a U.S. service member who was actually killed and declarations by the Panamanian government that plausibly put them in conflict with us. I'm not defending that operation, but there was at least arguments there that I think clearly, simply are totally unavailable here.
What implications does this unilateral operation have for international law and order, and what does it suggest about the US's role in global leadership?
In my view, the way the international community right now is responding to what Trump has done is walking an uneasy balance between trying to assert the meaning and force of international law on one hand, and on the other hand, just as a realistic, practical matter, not picking a fight with the US beyond what is needed. It's important for the purpose of international law that other countries state that they think the US is violating the law. And that's important because if they don't, actions like the US is taking can become part of international law and can become a precedent for other countries or the US again to do the same thing again.